Recording in progress.
All right, we're going.
All right, good evening, everybody. Today is November 9th, 2021, and this is the work session of the Oregon City Commission, and I'm calling this meeting to order. You can't hear it probably, but I'm gaveling us in. Mr. Wiley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Adam Marl. Here. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell. Here. Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
And Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith.
Here. So the first item we have up is a list of future work session agenda items. Mr. Conkle.
Thank you, Mayor. And actually, since we sent this out, one change for December 7th that we're looking at is, sorry, we have the, we were looking at the Park Place urbanization study, which was brought at the last meeting. And so potentially we're going to slide either the economic development plan or the ARPA funding, probably the ARPA funding, because we're still awaiting final rule from the federal government. So we didn't want to bring that forward until we had specific guidelines as to what we would be responsible for should there be an audit for how those funds can be spent. So that would be the one change. Was at the last meeting we talked about the Park Place urbanization study and trying to slide that into that December 7th work session to be able to review that. So that would be the one change there.
Okay.
Are we in receipt of those ARPA funds yet?
We have half. We have the first, it was going to come in 2 installments. So we did receive the first tranche. But once again, we're waiting until we see what the final rule is. As you remember, there were kind of 4 buckets that were identified. Some were very clear, such as the money available for water infrastructure. And we allocated in the budget about $6.5 million to go towards water infrastructure. Broadband infrastructure, we had allocated $200,000. So we have released the RFP for the broadband study. So we're working towards spending the monies that we were confident in budgeting because it was very, very clear that it fit into one of the 4 buckets. We're still waiting for a little bit of guidance on a portion of those funds, a significant portion of which we had set aside but had not allocated yet because we really didn't know the rules of the road when we adopted the budget back in June.
Are we uncomfortable proceeding with any disbursement whatsoever until we?
No, I think we're comfortable with the disbursements that were very clear, such as broadband, infrastructure, water infrastructure. There were reimbursements for under collection of tourism fees, gas tax fees, so transportation. Those we're very comfortable with. There was a large line item that was more general fund contingency that we just need a little bit of guidance still.
I recall that I specifically asked, and I believe Commissioner McGriff, we were hoping to have a work session with our friends at the Historic Review Board, maybe to go over some overall practices and guidance, even possibly provided by Mr. Kabaisman, so that we don't run into difficulties where the HRB makes a decision that does not appear to be in keeping with the guidelines and what the implications of that are with appeals and such. And I don't know if Commissioner McGriff still supports me on that.
Absolutely.
It's slated for January.
Well,
is that the January presentation?
Well, we're sliding. Right now we have scheduled in January a joint work session with the Planning Commission, abandoned buildings, and then we were asked to bring back the discussion about the Oregon City Westland pedestrian bridge. Right now we have slated for February. middle housing and incentives, the joint work session with the Historic Review Board, and compatible change.
Okay. Our staff report says that the HRB one's in January.
I'd rather switch the Planning Commission and the HRB. We just met with them.
Part of the meeting with the Planning Commission is to go over OC 2040 comp plan. So it is kind of imperative that we get that in January to keep that schedule on track. We could certainly try to push, I guess we could push the abandoned buildings regulation, or Oregon City West Lynn Bridge. We were asked to bring that back in January.
It's not going anywhere.
It's a bridge to nowhere. I'd be willing to push the Oregon City pedestrian bridge. And
I would too. I don't see that there's any urgency.
I'm in no rush.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
So we'll put that into February and try and schedule the HRB on the same night as the Planning Commission for the January meeting.
well, as we'll discuss tonight, those are two critical committees. Be nice to reconcile our relationships.
Or continue our relationships.
Tony, the only comment about the ARPA funds, when at the C4 meeting, Trent Wilson at the county was very clear that he's the point person for ARPA Clackamas County stuff. So if we want to do any coordinating with Clackamas County, I know they're using ARPA dollars in a variety of ways, but and there's some potential collaboration opportunities, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, that Trent is the county's point person for their ARPA dollar spending. So.
Okay, great, thank you.
What? Is he in transportation?
No, Trent is in their government affairs.
Oh, government affairs, okay.
All right, is there anything else on these future work items, work session work items from anybody? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Oops, hit the wrong button. All right, so our discussion items, the first one up is a presentation regarding FCS rate, SDC benchmarking. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. My sound okay? Seem okay?
Awesome.
All right, so tonight, really, I'm introducing John Geologic from the FCS group to go through his scope of work and some of the reasons why we're here before you tonight, and some of the things that we're thinking. This is related to one of your recent goals. So we're, I think in the goal itself, it talks specifically about water and stormwater. We're looking at all the all the stormwater SDCs and rates in the study. And so I've been working with John to kind of put together that scope in a way that I think meets the desires of the commission. But before we jump into that, we thought maybe we would just take this opportunity to go through it quickly and see if there's something different that you're looking for. We've got the ability to shift and move if needed. So with that, really, this is a presentation to talk about rate and SDCs and how we might benchmark against other agencies. And so with that, John Geologic is, I'm not sure if he's up in Washington or where, but he's with us online today. So
Either way, he looks ready.
I am. Yeah.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Before you get started, I'll let you know, I would like to hear either in your presentation or afterwards about whether or not this plays is in alignment or is supplemental to the SDC study that I believe the legislature just required to have happen. It is at the state level that they've required an SDC study. And if you aren't sure what I'm talking about, I'll try to.
Oh, I know. I do know what you're talking about.
Okay, great. So maybe you can address that in conjunction with this as to whether or not there's benefit to consider that process or not, or why we would want to move ahead with this versus wait on that or whatever.
Sure. And I can talk a little bit about what that project, that state project is. We are on the team of consultants that will be fulfilling that that study requirement. And what we will be looking at as part of that work, as requested, is the impact of system development charges on housing and housing prices and affordable housing development in general. So I'm greatly simplifying it, but it is a sort of a global look at SDCs and how they might be, I guess, modified in some small part to try and address some of the issues with affordable housing. Again, I don't have the scope in front of me, but that's what that generally is about.
Oh, okay. Great. I just want to make sure that it wasn't, that we weren't embarking upon something that would be duplicate, work that was happening at a state, but it sounds like it's separate. So that's great.
There will be some, I know we will be reporting as part of that study some of the practices of different agencies around the state. But I do think it will be very different from what we've been asked or we're proposing to do here. This is far more targeted on Oregon City, and what we're proposing to do here is look at the rates and system development charges for 20 comparable cities, and using some sample customers generate bills for a number of different services for both rates and SDCs, so you can really see across a much broader spectrum how Oregon City compares with its neighbors in the Portland metro area and around the state. And I'll talk a little bit more about sort of how we chose our initial 20 and hope to get some input from the commission if there are others you'd like to see or some on the list that you maybe aren't interested in. Sorry, I'm trying to get my slides to advance here. There we go. So I'll start off with some real big picture refreshers about the differences between rates and system development charges. Rates are the periodic, ongoing, usually monthly charges for service. They recover ongoing operating costs. That's salaries, power and chemicals, asset repair and maintenance, as opposed to capital costs, which are usually much bigger dollars. They kind of happen in chunks. You might have a major expenditure in one year and then lower years of expenditure, capital expenditures for years, and then another big one. So you have to plan carefully to smooth rates over time. So these are what your existing customers pay. System development charges are what new development pays at the time of development. It's the mechanism that the law gives us to provide for growth paying for growth. So these are one-time charges paid at the time of development. They're for a share of capital, and you can only use the money on capital construction, capital projects. So different audiences in general pay these. Costs that are recovered in SDCs tend to reduce the burden on ratepayers because it means that growth is paying for them rather than existing ratepayers. So the work plan includes, as I mentioned, 20 different cities. You'll see our initial list. We looked at some sort of obvious neighbors in the Portland metro area, and those are big and small. And then we tried to look for comparable cities around the state, in that 30 to 40,000 population range, right where Oregon City sits. And then we're going to look at 3 different customers to do this comparison. Typical single family residence, a fast food restaurant, and a big box discount store. And again, this is what we're proposing to do. We could swap in or out any one of these, although I would suggest single family residential you want in there for sure. And then we're going to compare the different services that we know Oregon City has rates for these 5, 6 services: water, wastewater, stormwater, transportation, parks, and public safety. Now, the 4 water, wastewater, stormwater, transportation, and parks all have system development charges available. So we will be comparing those 5 system development charges. Public safety doesn't have an SDC. It's not authorized in statute. So we'll just be comparing rates for public safety around the state. So these are the cities that seemed logical to us. You got some obvious neighbors: West Lynn, Milwaukee, Lake Oswego, and then, maybe a little farther reaching, but still in the Portland metro area: Gresham, Troutdale, Beaverton, Tigard, Wilsonville, Hillsborough, Sherwood, Forest Grove, Tualatin. Portland's an obvious one just because it's of interest to everyone. Canby, Sandy, and then sort of from a little farther out, Grants Pass, a similar population as is Redmond, McMinnville, Woodburn, and Albany. So you can think on those, or if you have thoughts right now about the list, about any on this list you might be less concerned about at the expense of some others that you would like to see. You can let me know now, or you could let John know after the meeting.
Seems like we have a couple that have some comments. Commissioner O'Donnell?
I'm looking for cities that are the same size as us or very close to it. And I'm also anticipating the projected growth, which I think could add as many as 22,000 additional people to this city over the next 20 years. I'll be quite honest, I don't have any interest in what Portland does, because for me, they're a reverse indicator. Whatever they do is not something I want to follow. But I look at some of these cities, maybe I'm always astounded at the cost of these studies. And I'm wondering if we could narrow it down to those cities that more fit our profile, as opposed to some of these cities, including Portland and some of the higher cities like Beaverton. I have got no objection to those that are similar to us at this point in time. That's my personal observation, and I'll defer to the my coworkers up here what their thoughts are.
Is there John, is there a benefit to looking at those higher population cities that we don't know about?
In my experience, and of course this is entirely up to you, in my experience, they're such high profile cities that they're useful just to know what's going on there. They kind of give you, sometimes they give you a boundary. So that's, but yeah, again, we're trying to create a list that will be of the most value to Oregon City. But that's what we've seen, that they sometimes are glaring when they're omitted, cities like Portland. But we didn't put Eugene on there, or Springfield, some other sort of high profile cities.
Why would you make that, omit those and put Portland on there? I mean, I can see places, like I know Redmond is a high growth city, probably comparable to us in the type of problems they have with growth and infrastructure. I think that's an excellent choice. But why would you choose to omit a Eugene or an Ashland and include a Portland?
Just because of proximity, because Portland's right there, and those are much farther away, and also demographically quite a bit different. But again, we're happy to shake the list up.
I won't comment further. Those are just my thoughts.
Commissioner Morrow?
Thank you. I think it would be helpful to have Gladstone on there, being that they're another one of our neighbors. And then the other one that I think of is Happy Valley. For years, they've been the fastest growing city in the state. And so I think that they have been going through things that we are anticipating, and they've had explosive development there. And so I think that would give us some really good insights as to what we're currently trying to figure out.
I'd agree with that.
Commissioner McGriff?
Yeah, I would agree with the other two that I would put Portland, Gresham, and Beaverton sort of as outliers. They could be 23, but we're kind of saying they're outliers, and I agree about adding Happy Valley. Are there any, I don't know what size Hood River is. They came to mind.
It's quite a bit smaller.
Smaller. Well, we've got some smaller ones on there, and maybe even, I don't know what Astoria's population is. They may be smaller. I couldn't think of anything on the coast that was sizable. I know that Coos Bay's got the largest population, but
Newport.
I wouldn't put them in there, but.
Maybe Newport.
Huh?
Maybe Newport.
True, but I think Newport's might be smaller than Lincoln City. I don't know, what's the population of Kaiser? I know they've been fast growing as well.
Let's see if I can find that while we're talking.
So it sounds like you've generally gotten some direction as far as the willingness to bring in some other cities that are more comparable in population, and a willingness for us to ditch some of the higher populations of Portland, Gresham.
I wasn't saying ditch them. I was just saying they're sort of an outlier. I mean, because we did compare ourselves the last time I remember, and we're going, oh, at least we're, lower than Portland, thank God.
Well, I think the issue then, though, comes down to scope of work.
True.
And they've scoped out 20 cities, so we'd probably need to swap some out, I would presume, unless we're willing to spend more money on this. I thought the contract was very reasonable at the price that they provided. So I'm willing to remove some in favor of the ones suggested, particularly Gladstone. And I would put Hillsborough in that group of Hillsborough, Beaverton. They're way on the other side of Portland, and they have higher populations. I'd rather see other ones that are more similar in population versus those two. And I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell. I could take or leave Portland, everybody can consider, looks at it on the list of how do we compare to Portland, and we have a bunch of people that's moving from Portland, or maybe businesses or that are interested in moving out of Portland, and so they would be interested in this comparative study. I would think of how much is it going to cost them to be here versus in the Portland. So yeah, I'm on the fence.
Kaiser's 39,000. That might be a good one to add.
Yeah. Well, I thought they were somewhere in that range.
It sounds like you've got some direction where we've provided some thoughts, and you got some freedom to swap out some.
Right.
If I could paraphrase. Oh, go ahead, John. Sorry.
No, I definitely think we can work on that. What I heard is a little bit more local and a little bit of the population that matches a little better for us. And I also heard about the growth piece. So, I always think of Milwaukee and their SDCs, or even Lake Oswego and their SDCs. They got no opportunity for growth. So how do we compare those? Rates maybe is a good comparison, but SDCs, it never really is a good match. So I'm hearing keep working on it with kind of some of those adjustment factors in mind. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was we've talked to John a little bit about water districts that are like CRW for one. How do we look at that comparison, and WES on the wastewater side. So I know we've talked a little bit about that. We didn't put them on the list, but we want to look at those too.
When there are regional charges that layer on top of these cities, we will include those regional charges. I think what I heard, and just to be a little bit more specific, is we could swap in Happy Valley, Gladstone, and Kaiser swap out Beaverton, Gresham, and Hillsborough, maybe leave in Portland just because it's such an obvious benchmark, and we would be, am I right? Would we be good to go?
Talk about leaving in Portland.
Nope, we said Ditcham.
We said no Portland. I do agree with what was said twice now, which is maybe a footnote on some of these specific cities that have high growth propensities. I think that's going to be a very driving force, but we don't need Portland in there. Cities of similar size, and footnote those, identify those with high growth, and I think those that Commissioner Marl said proximate to us, so I think we're good, and I think some of the other suggestions are good. The high population cities, I just don't see it.
Got it. Okay.
So my question is, how does this going to differ from what I mean, maybe it just seems like we just looked at it, but maybe it was a few years ago, but we looked at this before, so we're trying to look at what we have in goal number 2, but is this going to build on what we already have on the study that we already had?
I'll say it definitely builds on what we've seen before, but these rates and SDCs are change every time we look, right? A lot of agencies do this every year. So I think it does build on what we have, but it's going to be new information and updated information. And it meets the intent of what I think I heard what the City Commission's goal was, to try to figure out where we sit in relationship to all of our utilities. Because I think you've also talked about parks and how do you fund parks and those kind of things. So I thought that's what we were trying to kind of put into some context for you so that you could make decisions one way or the other.
So are you potentially looking at teeing up that we change these every year, or that's going to be part of the strategy that's coming out, or part of the recommendation or suggestion out of this study? I mean,
I'm not suggesting we do it every year. I know some agencies do.
right. Okay. You're just saying, here's the information and we can look at that. I thought we just raised them, so I don't really want to go there right now.
Okay. John, you want to keep?
So, yeah, and the 3 types of customers that we're proposing to compare, as I mentioned, a single family residence, and this is a sort of a typical profile for a single family residence. The 3/4 inch water meter, 6,000 gallons of water consumption monthly. From that information, we can come up with those rates and system development charges for all those different services. For a fast food establishment, we'll assume a 1.5 inch water meter. You see monthly consumption there. Impervious area, which would include the parking lot and then the building size. And for the purposes of transportation fees and SDCs, we need a specific land use. So that's what you see in that commercial classification description, fast food restaurant with a drive-through window. And then big box discount, which is a quote unquote freestanding discount store for the purposes of transportation SDCs and rates. We would assume a larger water meter, much larger footprint, impervious footprint, and building size. And what we've seen when we've done benchmarking work like this is most other land uses will be proportional. So you'll learn a lot just from these 2 commercial customer types and how the different rates and charges would apply to them. So that was our thinking on these. And of course, we need to have sort of we need to zero in on a profile for both of these in order to generate these sample bills and charges for different types of customers.
In our search for economic development, one of our pride and joys is an institution like Benchmade. Are these selections trying to encompass a a size wherein, like, say, Benchmade was like 160,000 square feet is essentially 4 acres, call it.
Yes.
So are we saying that if we had a manufacturing institution, which is something we'd love to attract a high-quality, clean manufacturing at some point, do gathering these three ranges of figures allow us to interpolate if we were to attract a light manufacturer or a high-quality, clean manufacturer, or would they be, are they useful or not useful?
They might be if there is a specific sort of general industry type that the city would like to attract. That might be a good profile to substitute in here for one of these commercial. We just essentially took a shot here. So if you have a more specific type of customer in mind, I would say let's substitute them in for one of these.
I'm not trying to dictate the terms of the study. Single family, obviously, that needs to be there.
I would agree.
And I don't know, fast food, it seems like we'd have a lot of knowledge on that since we seem to have a wealth of those already.
Well, my question about the fast food is that we don't allow uses anymore that have drive-throughs. So I don't see any new ones possibly coming in anywhere unless, one gets torn down and another gets put in. I think that our code now doesn't allow that.
There are other types of restaurants we could use instead if that would be of interest that aren't drive-through.
Yeah, I mean, most of them seem to be either they're in a shopping center or in some sort of mall-like setting. I mean, you think of Five Guys, you think of, the Pizza Huts.
Sort of a high turnover, but not drive-through.
Yeah, they're not, a lot of the new ones that are coming in, IHOP went into Trails End instead of a standalone. They're in a little mall shop bed.
I think what we're trying to do is make it as meaningful as possible and
Absolutely.
linking it, making a nexus with our economic development plan.
Yeah.
So, I mean, big box discount stores, do we anticipate having 4-acre discount stores pop up in this community?
I don't think so.
Maybe light manufacturing. I still would love to get another high-paying, high-quality, clean manufacturing solution here, although I know we need land to put them on. I actually agree with restaurants in terms of that's one of the offerings we want to have, not necessarily drive-throughs, but quality sit-down restaurants is one of the economic attractions I think we've discussed in those meetings. So, again, I'll yield the floor to others, but.
Trying to think of when the last standalone restaurant, I'd have to say it's probably was Berry Hill up there with Sherry's.
You just had one taken over by another company, right? The Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, already there, so.
Right, but that's the kind of thing we'd like to attract tourism for our quality of dining, not that we've got more fast food restaurants in any community. So maybe it's sit-down dining. I don't know how that differs appreciably from fast food.
Well, it is a different specific land use, and I think, if that's a better fit, I don't mean to. I know other commission members haven't weighed in, but as far as we're concerned, we'd be happy to swap in a standalone restaurant for fast food and look at a light industrial. We could work with John to come up with a reasonable profile for a light industrial customer. And if that would be more meaningful, happy to do it.
And I'll defer to my fellow commissioners. Those are my thoughts on it, and keeping in mind what our economic development targets are.
Again, these types, right? The residential is always pretty cut and dry, pretty clean, pretty easy to compare. We've tripped up over in the past the different land use types, right? You find out you've got one business out there that's got a 6-inch water meter or something like that. And all of a sudden their overall SDC impact is huge, and that has become, that's been a focal point. So I know in John's current scope, we've kind of limited it to the 2 commercial. I mean, I feel like maybe there's worth paying a little extra to get a little more work, maybe a couple of more categories that are focused a lot on, and we can get together with James and find out, really in the Beaver Creek concept area, what is that target that is most likely that he foresees on the horizon. We haven't kind of compared notes with Jim, so we can do that, maybe come up with 1 or 2 more categories and just help to inform the commission, because there's nothing worse than, you're right, we pick fast food with drive-in and, our code doesn't allow that, so we can fix that.
Well, the other thought I had, Mr. Lewis, is one of the things this city would like to do is increase our hotel density with the corresponding value of transient room tax. Is that a category? I don't know how that differs from these other, are they big water users? I would think they would be. So, maybe that's something we should discuss, because we would like to see additional hotels where you stay here and you spend here at this community. So that's just my final thought on the matter.
Right. So we'll sounds like I'm just feeling and sensing that a little bit more category would be good here and make sure it's matched well with what we would like to see for growth. And I think, so John, I don't know if you want to recap on that, but to me it is maybe adding in a category or 2, which would mean a little more work on your end, but, and looking at things like hotel or manufacturing that we might be targeting for the Beaver Creek area.
And I'm fine with that. If we can replace categories, meaning then there's no net budget impact. So, of course, that's up to you all. But, if there's less interest in fast food and big box discount, we could replace those with restaurant and light industrial. If there's also an interest in hotel motel, that would be a net add of 1, which would be a small budgetary impact. But I guess we'd be happy to add others. But again, the impacts are going to be roughly proportional. So except for maybe these more specific land uses, the ones like hotel motel, light industrial, and restaurants seem pretty representative, but that's again my take.
Okay, Commissioner Smith.
I just want to say that I agree with that conversation. I think the hotel idea is a good one. I think the light industrial and restaurant is a good one. So I'm open to be at 3 or 4 indicators would be okay with me.
Yeah, and I would say I would agree with that too. Swap out the fast food. And I'm just also considering just our general retail. I think that's an area that will always have more retail, hopefully growing. We hear that a lot of people would like to be able to shop a little bit more here without having to travel to other places. So, it looks to me like you're looking for different building sizes, and we have a variety of land use, zones that would be appropriate. Talk to economic development. We've given you several ideas this evening. And I would even be open to, if we're trying to stick to the scope, maybe we remove 5 cities and add another category or 2 if that's what we need to do. I'm not sure why 20 cities was picked as the magic number, if we need 20. We went over that list, but it looks like to me like you have plenty of cities in there. So, yeah, that's just my thoughts of massaging the scope a little bit. If that's, it seemed like we have more interest in building this area out than we do adding cities.
Yeah.
You asked us our opinion of the cities, and we clearly had plenty of opinions on them. But if
I agree with you.
Like if that's where the swap needs to take place, and we could still get value by 15 cities or something like that, then it seems like a better adjustment of scope.
Reallocation of the expenditure within the study.
Right,
yeah,
right.
I agree completely.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last thing that I'll leave you with is just sort of an overview. There are when developers look at developing in a city, they're looking at a number of different factors. Rates at SDCs are part of it. Of course, their overarching objective is to minimize their own risk, maximize profit. So one of the things that they appreciate and value is efficiency in getting approvals for building or changing land use on existing buildings, certainty when they do have windows to develop, availability of people to do the work, land prices and zoning flexibility. Many of these factors we're not going to be able to address in this work. We'll try to give you a few nuggets of information like median household income among these comparable cities, just to give you a sense of how things differ. What we've seen generally is with their other priorities met, that developers are usually willing to pay reasonable upfront charges if they believe that they're fair, and that they will typically choose to pay an SDC when the alternative is building something on site or delivering other infrastructure. So just a few things to keep in mind from our experience, and that's the end of our prepared material. So, and the input I heard was exactly what we were hoping for tonight.
Yeah, I guess I'll second that. We really have lots of latitude to take this different direction. So I just wanted to try to stay within the scope, make sure we're hitting the commission's desires and bringing back a product that you feel is useful. So if we miss that mark, that's a problem. So I'd rather get it figured out now. So thanks for your feedback. If you got any other things for us, otherwise we're done.
Okay, anything else from commissioners? Seeing none. All right, thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Both Johns.
Oh, sorry.
All
John
right.
number 1, John number 2.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to move on in the discussion items to item number 3, which is discussion of the mayoral appointment process to city positions. Mr. Conkle.
Thank you, evening, Mayor and Commissioners. For at least the last 2 decades, the practice in the city has been that the mayor appoints the members of almost all city committees and positions, largely based on Section 20 of the Oregon City Charter. The commission is now asked what limits there are on the mayoral appointment power and whether the commission as a whole may place limits on or be required to be consulted as part of the appointment process. Worked with Mr. Kabaisman. He prepared kind of an analysis of Section 20 of the Oregon City Charter. I could have Mr. Kabaisman summarize that, or if you've had a chance to read that, if you'd like to begin your discussions and questions, whatever your pleasure.
I assume we're probably ready to talk about it. And Mr. Kabaisman can be available for questions. I believe most commissioners have had some thoughts on this topic coming into the topic. Yeah, I'll turn it over to the commissioners. I guess before I do that, I'll just say I would like us to think about what we're trying to accomplish. The memo from Mr. Kabaisman was very broad. He covered all of the committees and, all the various things. Some of those committees I know I haven't never even made an appointment to. I'm not even sure they're still functional. So, in fact, I'm pretty sure a couple of them aren't. So, anyway, I thought that this was focused on the Planning Commission and HRB, but I'd be interested in hearing from the other commissioners on the problem we're trying to solve, or maybe if it's a more narrow, and what your thoughts are. Whoever. Commissioner Morrow.
Yeah, I'll start. Thank you, Mayor. I would prefer to stick to Planning Commission and HRB, as those are not advisory committees or commissions. They have that decision-making authority. And, I just think that this last year has shown us why this conversation is necessary. Before I proposed that we add this to a future agenda item, I did call the mayor and say that it wasn't because I thought she didn't have the decision-making to do that, and because I do not trust her. It's because I think that our system has given us a good example, or several good examples, for why we should be having this conversation. And, when I've been talking to some of my friends on city councils, both in Westland and Gladstone, they asked me, what are some of the things you're focusing on? And I've told them about this, and they were just a little surprised because they already do that. I know it's a mixed bag across the state, but I think that this would be important for us to consider. I know that when the mayor made her appointments as city council president at the beginning of the year, she said that she had campaigned on this issue, running both for city commission, and then I did ask her about this when she ran for mayor. And so I just want to reiterate the fact that it's not because I have anything against our mayor. It's because I think that this is a conversation that we should have had a while ago.
Others?
Start flying my way.
Whoever's ready. Looks like Commissioner Smith's ready.
I'm actually kind of mixed on this. I do think, I agree with Commissioner Romaro in terms of the HRB and Planning Commission and concerns of what has happened in the past. But so I'm a little, open to that conversation. I also, though, think that, one of the traditions has been, that's the position of the mayor, has this authority to do some things a little different in terms of appointing individual committees. But so I think we don't want to completely eliminate the one thing that, the one power, I guess, that the mayor has beyond being a regular city commissioner. But I do think that, it's how the individual mayors handle it. And the truth is sometimes they don't handle it very well. If I was a mayor in the future, I would want help from the commission, and I would want support from the commission in making decisions for committees, because I think that's a smart thing. But that's kind of, has been the opportunity for the mayor to do that. And in the cases where a mayor doesn't do that, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we've had definitely some instances where we've seen a result where, individual groups or citizens have proposed certain people that they felt were confident and capable. And in the past, the mayor has completely ignored them. And in those cases, it wasn't so much that I disagreed with the mayor's appointment, but there was never response back to the citizens or the recommendations by these individual committees about why the mayor wouldn't have followed through, or at least responded back to the fact that they weren't following kind of the recommendation that came to them. I think there at least warrants a response in those situations where, there's kind of a reference or a recommendation by a group, and it comes to the commission through that process, or to the mayor through that process, and then the mayor completely does something different. There should be at least an explanation back to them as to why that choice was made. So that's one of the main concerns I've had in the past, but I'm pretty open to this conversation. I think, I could fall kind of either way on it. But I think limiting it maybe to the committees that, or the commissions that Commissioner Morrell's talking about might be the best thing.
Commissioner Morrow?
Yeah, thank you. I'll just add really quickly that I don't expect any of your nominees, or if we're being honest, for mayors in the future, I don't expect them to be these heated fights that we see in Washington, D.C. I think that this just gives us another check, and I would fully expect 99% of all of them to go, with no questions at all. I think that just having another check would be helpful.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Go ahead, Frank.
Well, I would structure my answer in terms of the form of government that we have here. We have a weak mayor form of government. despite that, I think this mayor has done an outstanding job, and I want to compliment you, and I know how hard you work at this. But what I don't want to do is rely on the goodwill of a future mayor to exercise the same type of discretion that our current mayor is. And quite honestly, no one person up here, including the mayor's position, is responsible for the direction of this city. And as such, we should share in the successes, and maybe we should share in the failures. Maybe we should if they fail. And I think it almost is a better thing for the group as a whole, and only on these two committees, planning and HRB. The other ones, I'm not saying they're inconsequential, but the impact of these two committees is huge, and we've seen it. And these are two committees that decisions are appealed to this commission. But we want wisdom on there, and we want an attitude that is for the betterment of this community. So I like the idea of only on these two committees, spreading the decision-making among the entire commission. And in fact, that would help any one person avoid the influence and maybe being the focus of a group that is demanding of do this, when in fact, the better choice is to do something different. Let this entire commission bear that responsibility and be responsible for the choices we make. That might be construed as saying share the heat when people don't like the way things go, but that's my thoughts. And again, I think our current mayor has done an outstanding job, but I don't want to be at the risk of the quality or goals of a future mayor. Thanks.
Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, thank you. I probably more than any of you have been subjected to an arbitrary appointment. When I re-upped for my second term on the Planning Commission, I was the only applicant. I was interviewed by the commission itself and then interviewed by, and the recommendation was made, and I received a lot of pushback on that at that particular time, with the comment that, well, I wouldn't have appointed you, but you were the only person that applied. And that I don't want to see that happen to anyone. I think it's very important for the boards and commissions that we have to have them participate in the selection, because you're talking about a group that's got to work together, and they can see the dynamic of whoever it is that's out there to see whether that person, number one, is qualified and whether they'd be a good fit. I think that when you have, that doesn't allow for that to happen. I mean, that's been the past practice up until the mayor prior to you, Rachel. And it seemed to have worked well. We got into another situation where recommendations were made when I was on the Planning Commission, as was alluded to, that were completely disregarded. And I think that had a lot to do with control. And I don't really see that in the past, except that incident and currently. But I do think that people have to be able to work together. And I think totally, and let me just switch to the other part of it. So totally relying on the chair of a committee to be the sole other person in the interview, I don't think is totally appropriate, because they are just one person. And you've got to look at the group dynamics and how somebody else fits into that dynamic. If you're making an appointment, you've got 2 vacancies, 3 vacancies, how does that person work well with others? I mean, it's always been a question, how well do you get along with other people? And that's critical, to have the group, committee, commission, whoever it is, working together so that there is a common goal to look in the best interest of the city. I think that, as was alluded by my colleagues, is that the Planning Commission and the HRB both are quasi-judicial land use bodies that make recommendations to us as commissioners, no matter who the commission is at the time. I won't be here, but so I think, again, looking at the broader picture of how those get done and how those appointments made are critical. And I agree that we cannot rely on the goodwill of the person that's in that office, because we already know how that worked. It changed, and it was not in the best interest of the city. And we're always going to get, some, I don't want to say bad actors, but we're always going to get something that doesn't quite fit, and we've got to be able to resolve that. So I kind of agree with the both of you, but I expanded my scope to broader than that. And, we all know people, we all, we're all able to work well together. And I think that this commission and future commissions could and should be involved.
Okay, so it sounds like there's general consensus on this item for moving forward with the idea of having the city commission determine HRB and planning commission. I agree with that move too, or at least putting it forth to a vote of our residents. I believe it would require a charter change, and therefore it'd have to go to a vote of the people. I think what Commissioner McGriff mentioned as far as like the interview process and who gets included and the how you want to do that, I think that's generally can be decided by the city commission once you get to that point. I don't think that level of detail generally needs to be in the charter. And you'd get to that with your commission rules, and you'd figure that out. Mr. Gunkel.
I guess the question would be, so both Planning Commission and Historic Review Board identify the mayor makes the appointment in the Oregon City Municipal Code in the sections for those. So what we've been discussing is, essentially the concept of the commission interprets its charter. I guess is the desire of the commission, if we, Jill and I talk, and there's a way to implement what I'm hearing in terms of the commission makes the decision for the appointments for Planning Commission and Historic Review Board without going to the voters. Are you interested in that, or do you want this
I
in
totally
the charter?
support that. I'm not supporting a charter change because I don't think it's necessary if it's only in the municipal code. I like to save the expense.
Others?
So
What I don't want is a future argument about how these things are done and people saying, well, based on past practice, and then the argument comes up, well, our past practices varies from mayor to mayor, therefore we will allow that specific mayor to exert their choice. And I think we're going to have a number of issues tonight that may be the subject of a ballot.
But if it's in the municipal code, that's easier to change and
So-
far less onerous process in the charter.
So, correct. So, upside, a majority of the commissioners can amend the municipal code through ordinance. Okay. So you would need in the future a majority of commissioners, and so we wouldn't, once it's in the municipal code, we don't get to interpret it. If it says that the planning commission is appointed by a majority of the city commission, that's how it's processed. So downside, a future commission could change the ordinance to say the mayor gets to appoint again. It could go back to what it is. If you put it in the charter, then it has to go to a vote of the people to make such a change. That's the difference there.
Commissioner Morrow?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell. I want it to be crystal clear to future commissions the process that we would prefer it to go. And also just out of respect for the mayor, I think that sending this to the people would be a good idea, and having it in our highest document. Personally, the system that I was thinking of was mayor, whoever they are, putting out a list of names for whatever committees are open and basically having an up or down vote. But, I don't really care about the minutia of that. But I would prefer to send this to the people for a charter amendment, even though it's a little more complicated, because I don't want there to be room for interpretation or based off of what that commission thinks at the time.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
I'd support Commissioner Morrow on that entirely. And my thoughts are, there's every possibility at any given time of a major swing in the composition of this commission, whether it be 3, possibly even 4 positions. And if you get a pack that puts together a group of candidates, they can come up here and undo anything that's been done. I like casting it in stone. And in the end, the only recourse the citizen has is to the elected officials. We're the only ones that can be held responsible by their vote. And I just soon put it on the line and let them have their say in the form of a vote on a charter change. Thanks.
Commissioner Smith?
I kind of agree with that. I think, because I could go either way on some of these conversations. I think in reality, it is the citizens of this town to make that decision. And I know it's come up. Some of these topics tonight have only come up because we, as a commission, have been hearing it from citizens in the community. And so I don't know that it would have been brought up, without that kind of question in the last year or two. So I think if that question is out there in the community, which I believe it is, then it really is a broader conversation that I don't want also the public to think that this individual commission is trying to make a decision just on its own about the future when some of us may or may not be on the commission in the future. It's really not our total decision. It's the voters of the city.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith, and I would agree with you on that as well. And I actually think we're going to have other charter amendments that we're going to talk about as we move on in the agenda for tonight. So it sounds like there's general consensus about doing it in the charter. Mr. Kabaisman and Mr. Conkle, in this last year that I've either been commission president or mayor, the topic of you both will know that the topic of removal of commissioners from both of these two committees, commissions has come up, and the three of us have had several meetings to discuss this topic and how this topic is not very clear on the processes and procedure, or in some cases, it may be that there would have to be a full due process hearing. And if we had some concerns about someone and their performance, that we would have to have a court hearing where they came and they, we kind of a trial where we talk about anything they've done and their performance out in public. So maybe that's coming back for a future meeting, but if we need to meet again to talk about charter changes, that would be something that I would recommend too, that this commission consider if we're cleaning up language, to consider cleaning up that section as well, because I know we've been asked a couple of times and it's come up and it's not addressed well, if at all. And it's a topic that if we're tackling it, we might as well clean it up and do it. I would recommend the commission consider that.
Certainly agree with that.
Well, with all due respect, all of us have not been having those conversations, so I don't.
Well, I know, that's why I'm telling you.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying, I'm just admitting, I've not been involved in those conversations.
Yeah.
Once again, I think, so for example, planning commission, removal of a member. A planning commission member may be removed by the city commissioner after hearing for misconduct or non-performance of duty. That's the extent of it. So just differentiating, again, this is in Oregon City Municipal Code. So I guess I'm not sure if I'm hearing about a removal process and wanting to put that in the charter, or, changing the municipal code is, this isn't land use. This is adopting an ordinance, reading it twice. It's questionable. So it could either be a legislative process that we go through, like when we change the land use code, or a typical ordinance where we change other sections of the code.
I would support that.
I would as well.
Support changing the
code.
code, not putting that into the charter.
Right.
No.
Okay.
I support that. That simple statement alone leaves much to be desired.
You're off.
Yeah.
I would support that. That simple statement alone leaves much to be desired, as, for example, what are the causative reasons for consideration of removal? And maybe a listing of examples.
Yeah, it's just
Not,
performance.
not,
and-
not excluding anything, but typical examples would be.
Yeah. All right. So it sounds like there's general consensus. I would agree with that. If we can clean that up, we can put that on the list of things to do that we circle back to maybe at a later time. I just kind of want to bring it up since we were talking about it. And I know that I've had a few conversations with Mr. Kabizman and Mr. Conkle and with some of our citizens, frankly, who asked for meetings and asked to talk about the performance of our planning commission and HRB. So just want to mention it since we were on that topic.
Yeah, those conversations, people have approached me about that.
Commissioner Smith.
So also in that Oregon City Charter Section 20, I thought we've cleaned up some of this stuff in the past, but it clearly has some gender-specific issues as regard to mayor that should be changed at some time as well.
Yeah, I think there's general agreement. We've talked about that kind of in passing. If we're making charter changes, I think the challenge for us is going to be, and we haven't gotten there yet, is like, how do we want to go about these charter changes? Clearly, this commission is feeling opinionated enough to move forward without asking, creating a charter committee and all this kind of stuff to talk about charter improvements and stuff like that. It sounds like we're willing to just give specific direction. The question of how we address the gender throughout the entire document. I know, which city just had it on their ballot? Gladstone, of doing some cleanup. So maybe we can mimic what they did. Commissioner Morrow?
Yeah, at first, when I brought these two things up, it wasn't with the intent of forming another committee. I'm weary of that, given the constraints we have on staff. But, like Commissioner Smith was saying, when I was reading the Section 20 and I noticed the mayor, he shall, it's not a huge deal for me, but if we're in the process of looking through things, I do think that there could be a benefit of having a committee look at some more broad issues in an advisory role to the commission. That's not something that I feel super strongly about because these two issues are the ones that I feel the most strongly about, and I'm not willing to let these get bogged down because of that, but that's something that I would be willing to support.
Mayor Lyle-Smith?
Commissioner McGriff?
I don't know whether we can clean those up because they're, in my opinion, they kind of end up being like Scribner's errors. It's the times have changed. I think that we are going to find that once we embark on implementing our goal 1, we will find that there may be some other things that come out of that because one of the things they will probably be charged with is looking through some of our other documents. So I think that if we have the opportunity to do things where economies of scale, that might be a way to go. I know you feel very strongly about this. We've had offline discussions about it. So I just want to point that out that, there are other things that are going to get looked at. Our policies, our goals, our, words going to get looked at. So that's upcoming.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
No, I'm just kidding.
Nope. All right. So it sounds like we have maybe general agreement for the sections that we're working on. You can work and for the record, I do not, that chartered language doesn't bother me at all from doing my job. I just ignore all that he stuff and I'm going to do my job and move on. So, but that's me. I'm fine being a female and I'm fine doing this job and I'll move on. But I agree with Commissioner Smith though. I think, we have a lot of stuff that, our codes and all that kind of stuff that, generally need a refresh. I mean, we still laugh about it, but, the chief of police still has some responsibilities in there that we left in there that, on purpose because it was funny, but.
As does the public works director.
And the public works director, but, there's all kinds of stuff hidden in those codes for cleanup that are ripe. Mr. Kabizman, you look like you have something to say.
Nope.
No? Okay, good.
Just writing down what I think we're hearing, and I think we're in pretty good shape in terms of, charter change to allow the commission to appoint planning commission, HRB, other bodies with quasi-judicial authority, just to put that at their future, could change to clean up the removal process and bring those back to you.
Okay. All right, it sounds like we can move on to the next item, which is very related. This is a discussion of alternatives to the current method of electing commissioners to fill certain positions. Would you like a report out from Mr. Kabizman or Mr. Conkle, or do we just want to have discussion?
Ready for discussion.
Well, I know Commissioner Morrow this is a bee in his bonnet.
I'm ready to have the discussion. I thought Mr. Kabizman's memo was very concise and a good starting point for the conversation, and I'm confident that everybody up here has read it.
Yeah, I'm seeing general thumbs up, so we'll save you from any presentations and we'll just discuss. Yeah, I remember this topic coming up, I believe in public comment from Mr. Mike Mitchell. A couple of times last year, I believe it was.
It's come up 3 times. I brought it up, and we didn't want to put it on the recall election. Mr. Mitchell brought it up, and Commissioner Morrow brought it up. So this is a timely conversation.
Yeah, and so the recommendation, if I remember correctly, from Mike Mitchell, and I think from you, Commissioner O'Donnell, was that we wanted to have a way where folks did not have to pick a particular seat, and that we could have acknowledged the number of vacant seats that were on the city commission, and therefore we would take the top 2 highest votes, or just let people be able to vote from all of the selected people who had applied for the open seats, because we have seen in the past, I know there is that jockeying. Most of us up here who have been through that election process know, you look and see, is the person rerunning, and is there an incumbent, am I trying to fill a gap, or, and all of that, versus just saying, these are the 2 positions that are up for re-election. And it kind of saves some of that jockeying and the pros and cons of going through that process. But I think that was the primary conversation that was being considered. Other comments?
Okay.
Commissioner Morrow.
You want to go?
Yeah, you summarized it pretty well, and I think this is about choices for me. If I were in a position where there were 2 candidates that I really liked that were running for one position, and 2 candidates that I was not very fond of running for another one, I would have to choose one of each of them. And I don't think that's fair to the voters, for them to be able to select the candidates that they want representing them. And this, as you guys saw in the memo, is something that's commonly practiced. And so I think with a city that's our size, we don't have wards or boroughs. I think it just makes sense for us to move forward with a choose 2 sort of system that allows voters to not have to be strategic about how they're voting, or not have our candidates be strategic about who they're running against.
Other comments?
Well, I totally agree. That's been my position forever. Commissioner Morrow summarized it well. I want continuity in this commission. There is a learning curve up here, and I want to compliment Mr. Kabizman for pointing out potential for a 3rd position in the event a commissioner were to be no longer able to fulfill his duties. And in addition to the 2 elected positions that we customarily do, there would be a 3rd position. And of course, the scenarios he painted where, does a 3rd place finisher get that? Or do we change the thing where the current system where, and the commission appoints the individual to fill that vacant position? Currently, for example, if I were to leave, the person who filled my position would only be there until the very next election. However, maybe in the interest of continuity, it would be best if that person that filled that position fulfilled the remainder of that term which they are filling. So I thought that was a very good catch by Mr. Kabizman and worthy of discussion. I guess we go back to the forms of election. I'm all for keeping it simple with our electoral system being the subject of criticism. Let's just keep it simple. The two top candidates citywide get the two regular positions that are open at that time. I don't want any other forms that involve calculations that the average person doesn't understand. Two top winners get it for the very reasons that Commissioner Marl said. The only other consideration then is if there's a third vacancy that's out of the sequence of term, what would this commission's direction be?
Commissioner Smith.
I'm not sure how helpful I'll be on this conversation. I've obviously ran 3 times in the current process and didn't have many issues with it. I see what everyone is saying about that, and so I guess I'm not opposed to getting citizens, opinions on that or putting it out to a vote, but. Again, some of us will be running in the future and probably shouldn't weigh in on that conversation. But I guess the other question I'm interested in, I didn't get into a lot of thinking in terms of that third, the vacancies and all of that. So I think that's an interesting piece. There's other issues in some of the ways some of this has been written as well that have kind of affected who can run and who cannot run. So I feel like, if this is something that we want to put out there to the citizens with the other conversation and with the other issue, then I'm okay with that. But I don't feel one way or another really on this one.
Okay. I will say I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Marl. I like the simplicity of we have 2 open positions, which is typically the case. It would be 2 city commission positions. The mayor, I believe, we haven't discussed, but it would always be its own separate election. But it's usually there's 2 open city commission seats that would be open for vote, and it would just be the top 2 candidates out of the results of the election that would go into that. And I support that, making it simple. And I think it would improve, maybe remove a little bit of some of the politics that happen around the particular positions. So I'm all in favor of kind of removing politics as much as possible from the process, and just having the process be based on the candidates. And then on the additional piece of filling vacancies, my thought is I would be happy with filling if there's another vacancy. I don't have a desire to return to the voting list. I would prefer to let the sitting city commissioners kind of follow our process now of appointing someone, having an application process we appoint but I do like the idea of remainder of term. I was kind of thinking that that's what we did, but maybe it's within, if it's within a certain amount of time period, then we can appoint.
Generally speaking, there's a general election every 2 years. And so if someone gets elected and 6 months later has to move out of the community, the current charter would have the commission appoint somebody for the next 18 months, but then there'd be a general election, and that election position would then serve out the remaining 2 years. And so if the vacancy happens early in a term, that's when this problem comes up, because then you'd have, that out of cycle vacancy come up in that. So you'd have 3 people running, and one of the candidates would end up getting, a smaller term. And so, one solution to avoid this, Commissioner O'Donnell indicated his preference was when the commission appoints somebody, they just serve out the remainder of the term.
Okay. Oh, I appreciate that explanation. I guess I can go either way. I'll change what I said. I could go either way on that. I do think there's value in the person running for an election. I'm kind of thinking this through. If someone were to leave their term 6 months in, and then the commission were to appoint for the remainder 3.5 years, I do think there is benefit to having someone run and it be a more public and competitive process.
Absolutely. Having someone directly elected by the voters
Right.
has some real value.
4 years is a long term. Commissioner O'Donnell.
I advocate for appointment by the commission and fulfilling the remainder of term for a couple of reasons. One is continuity. Two is the avoidance of a power play by any one group that heavily finances a list of candidates and could totally change the direction of the city, whereas a carryover from the previous commission would strike a balance. It also avoids that learning curve. And that first year, I don't know how city staff does it with a new commission every so often. And I know my first year up here was very difficult. And I just like a little bit of moving out of the transition from one commission to another, and not a potential change where you get 4 out of 5 slots change in one election. So that's why I advocate for the remainder of term approach.
That makes sense. Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, so I'm going to weigh in a little bit here. So I'll be contrary on the filling out of the remainder of the term. Obviously, we've got 2 people on here who have been in that position, one who is still in that position and the other one who is not. So we have some experience. It was only 1.5 years. But I believe if you look at our neighbors across the river, Councilor Jones was appointed, I think it was maybe less than 3 months before the election, and then he ran for election. So, I mean, it's possible that could happen, and I don't see that as a big problem. However, I think I want to be contrary on the other topic. I've had this discussion with Commissioner Morrow, and I'm just wanting to know, what are the unintended consequences? Because there always are. And I have seen nothing that's been written that we've submitted that says, well, maybe this isn't such a great idea. My concern is that on appearance, and I'm just saying, I'm being devil's advocate at this point, it looks like it's a big giant popularity contest. And I don't really want to see that happen.
Well, that's what democracy is.
Well, I understand to a certain degree, but I would like to see some pros and cons before I weigh in on it to say, yes, I think this is the greatest thing since sliced toast, because unfortunately the way my thinking goes, I'm always thinking about risk. I'm always thinking about, again, the term I like to use, the unintended consequences. So if there are none, I would just like to be sure that I've looked at both sides of the issue and I've only seen one side.
I don't know of any cons, but I'm open to hearing what they are.
There may be some out there, so
Yeah.
I'm willing to read whatever. I'm
Yeah.
not really, in a position to say, yes or no at this point in time.
In the material I submitted to you, there's 2 publications, one by the League of Women Voters of Washington and the other by Fair Vote, the Center for Voting and
Yeah, I
Democracy.
didn't print the League of Women Voters because it was 67 something pages. I did look at this, so I'm about halfway done with this one.
Yeah, and every system of voting has some pros and cons. There's
Sure.
no perfect system, but those documents go through various systems and explain some of the advantages and disadvantages in terms of wasted votes, voter choice, spoiler, and in far more detail than I
Election
can really
method
do tonight.
performance scores, that's what you're talking about?
I'm sorry?
The election method performance scores?
Yeah, And I'm sure there's other groups that might have a different approach on it, but these seemed like 2 helpful ones. And so, that might help you, the commission, consider what the cons are and what changes in terms of going from one particular method to another. And I know there's a lot of information in there, including a lot of methods that that the commission is not even considering. And I can call out the parts comparing the 2 and get that to you if you'd like.
Sure, yeah, I'm just interested in the facts. I'd like to be able to weigh in having all the information so that I can be sure in my mind, because if I'm going to support something, I want to be able to speak to facts and not sort of hyperbole. And if I'm going to be opposing it, then I also want to have the same information, so.
Of course.
Commissioners, Commissioner Marl, do you have any comments on like maybe the cons to this, the proposal that we've been talking about tonight? Do you know of any?
Yeah, and I also just want to commend Mr. Kbeisman for the memo. It's funny because I was reading materials like these for homework just last year from League of Women Voters, from Fair Vote, and for my degree. And so what we see with any changes, the main one that I can think of is just people being confused by the process. I think that comes into play, especially when you think of those newer forms like star voting and ranked choice voting, which is something that I like, but I don't think it's necessary at a municipal level when there's no parties involved. So I think the biggest risk in any change is just that people don't understand, they fill out their ballot wrong, and it isn't submitted. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I would say the one thing that I do appreciate about the system that we have now is I certainly appreciate the fact that it is nonpartisan. And I really feel very strongly about that, because I think that political party really doesn't have anything to bear on what we're doing at this level. And it's really important to me to help the public understand that our intent is for the best interest of the entire community, not just party A, party B, party C, or whoever they may be. That's not how it works here. And that it's important that the public understand that. I mean, I've been asked many times, and I said it's irrelevant. You know, I said, if you want to look and see how I voted, or, you know, whatever, you feel free to look it up. But I said, it's irrelevant to what I'm doing here. It's not relevant to me.
Yeah, that comment generally isn't satisfactory for those folks who are asking.
I know.
So I guess I agree with you 100%, and it really aggravated me in recent elections where you saw advertisements and things become more politicized and supported by a particular party or not, because this is meant to be nonpartisan, and we've seen it in other commissions. I won't call out any cities by name, but
we know what you're talking about.
where there have been some kind of infighting as to whether or not, oh, well, these folks are conservative and these two are non-conservative, and we want to have this balance or this not balance. The best way to combat that is to put them all in the same bucket, so they cannot say, well, this position is going, you know, there's two open positions, so we want this position, all of the candidates lean one way, and in this position they lean another way, or something like that, or trying to, again, working those two positions.
Or 3 or 4,
or 3 could be done in the current system that we have. So putting them all in the same category kind of prevents that. It's like, because you have no idea, you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
you're not
exactly.
picking the position. It's like, okay,
exactly.
The top 2 are going to win. And that's just it. It kind of removes some of that. Again, it kind of removes some of those politics that we were alluding to earlier.
I wish the county would be nonpartisan. I think that it would help a lot more.
Yeah.
In the long term.
I've thought about this, not extensively, and I'm not a poli-sci major. So trying to think of the cons to this approach, and I keep coming up with pros. Another thing that it would address is, I think historically we've heard grumblings of, well, these two people apply, once the deadline's over, I'll withdraw. Right? I mean, we've heard that before. This takes that out of the equation.
Have we?
So
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to think more on cons, or I don't know if you want us to look into it a little bit. I'm not sure what the cons are.
I'm happy to do my homework,
moving
so
more
we don't
towards
have to
that
go
group
into it anymore. I'm
voting.
happy to do my homework and due diligence.
Yeah. Well, the fact that we're having a hard time coming up with cons is a pretty good sign. And I think we generally have agreement of a direction of that we would like to move in that direction. I think you're going to end up bringing something back to us based on all of this guidance that we're giving you tonight.
Well, and if I could just real quick on the summary for the vacancy, I think we've got kind of three options, right? Change the charter to make the commission appointment for the remainder of the term that's been vacated. Put the vacancy on the general, and the third vote gets the vacant position. Personally, I think it's a little clunky. It almost seems cleaner to have it as a separate standalone issue.
I don't support
if
that.
we're not going to do the first part, right? If we're not going to change the chart, because we'll have to change another section of the charter that deals with vacancies and when the vote happens upon the next general election. So if we're not going to do that, then we've got to somehow address it. And it does seem cleaner to have a vote for a 4-year term, the 2 4-year terms, and then a vote under a separate ballot measure title for the remainder of the, 2 years, 2.5 years, 6 months, whatever. No, it'd be more than 2 years. So I guess a little direction there, or if you just want us to put those options down so you can think about it when we bring it back and you can make a decision then as to what looks more appropriate. We don't need a decision tonight. I mean, really, I think we got 3 options.
I think the option you just proposed, which is the third position, which is only vacant for a partial term, being separated from the others in terms of a vote. That's an intelligent option. That would be good. The reason I wanted the continuity of an appointment is because I don't want an abrupt stop to a course of action that could be potentially brought about by a power play by a heavily financed group of candidates, that all of a sudden you've been going one direction for years, and all of a sudden that's a dead stop and you switch directions entirely. Now, the electorate can still make that choice by electing the 2 candidates that would favor that change. But again, it gives me a more balanced commission. Maybe the answer is the third proposal you just put out, which is the partial position is a separate matter on the ballot. I think that's clean.
Yeah, I think the only thing is we haven't figured out if that separate ballot measure would be going to a vote at the next general election, or if it's for the remainder of the term. I think that's the only thing that's outstanding, right? Well, if it's the one way, we don't need to change anything.
Correct.
It would.
We would maintain our existing.
If we maintain our existing.
The way the charter is written now. So if it's within, someone's elected, they resign within 6 months, the commission appoints somebody, the person, then we would hold an election at the next general. That's what the charter currently says. So in that case, we would have an election, and the top 2 vote getters would be seated to the 4-year terms that are open. And then we would have a second question that would say, who fills the remainder of the vacant commission position for the last 2 years?
That's a good solution for a number of reasons. Certainly don't want, the third place finisher gets the partial deal, right?
And then they don't want it.
And they don't want it because I came here to do all 4 years and do what I need to do.
Right.
So I like the idea of severing it. People have their say. And it doesn't require a lot of changes because an appointee would fill out the position until the next election. Then it could decide what to run for. I think that's a solid solution.
So what is the?
But that's our current charter process.
No,
Yeah.
Have to take a look and
For
make
filling
sure that that's,
but we don't differentiate between, on the ballot, we wouldn't be currently different. We just put 3 positions up there. And if we change the method of voting, be a first, second, and third place finisher.
I don't think you're
I
saying,
see
no,
what
you're
you're saying.
not,
I know what
I
you're
don't think you're saying the same thing he's saying.
I don't know.
I think what we could do is, we put some sample language for section 8 on page 2, and it says, the ballot shall include a single list of candidates for commission seats. And, under that, it'd be 3. And I think what I'm hearing Tony and Frank say is, the ballot shall include a single list of candidates for commission seats, except any unexpired terms, which would be subject to a separate election or something along those lines. So we could probably keep section 32, but make some changes in section 8 to sort of recognize that we're going to separate the two open seats from the vacants, the filling unexpired term.
So does section 32 talk about the length?
What it says is,
So for the example that Frank used, so elected to a 4-year term, 6 months in, something happens, and there's, what, 3 years?
3.5 years.
3.5 years, 3.5 years plus or minus on the term. So that's considered to be an unexpired term.
Correct.
So the commission asks for candidates, we interview them, we appoint somebody. So they would hold that seat until that term expires. That's the way it currently works now, right?
No.
No. So is it the length of time?
So what it says is the appointee's term of office, commission interviews, appoint somebody. The appointee's term of office shall begin immediately upon his appointment and shall continue until the next general election and until successor is duly elected and qualified to complete the unexpired or new term of the office is applicable. So if you appoint, if somebody...
Well, let's just use myself as the example. So I filled an unexpired term. It went until a certain time. The term ended.
You had to run for election.
So what
And then if I wanted to keep that position, then I ran for office.
So if the term expires with less than 2 years in it, the next general election will coincide with when that
Regular.
Right.
term would begin. And so there'd be no problem. Wouldn't have to change
So we're
anything.
talking about something longer than a year and a half?
Correct. So if somebody gets, if the position become, if
Yes.
the commission seat is vacant longer than 2 years, then you would have a situation where you're sort of out of phase because the next general election would be offset. It wouldn't, you'd have 3 commission seats up for election that year, and you want to get them back in phase. And so would that third seat then have 4 years, and then it would just get kind of catawampus. And so it's, how do you ensure that if you're going to have an election, that person only, that the two seats every 2 years continues?
There is a time component, and it didn't.
Okay, that's what I asked, if there was a time
Yes,
component.
there is a time component, and it did not apply to you,
Right,
Commissioner
or to-
McGriff,
or
or
to
to Commissioner
Commissioner
Morrow,
Morrow.
because you were both within the final 2 years of
Of the term,
of the
right. That's what I-
position
that's
that where the
the
term was
question I was
expiring.
asking.
So we appointed you, and we also appointed Commissioner Morrow, and both of you were just completed. You completed the term, and then you ran for reelection and
Or election?
Commission-
Yeah, election.
election. And then Commissioner Morrow will finish his term because it was within the
So that's
last
why
2
the question I was
years.
asking.
There is a time
Is
component.
what you just said,
Yes.
yes. So if it's longer than a year and a half or 2 years, then you're saying that it would be out of,
So if you would have been appointed, if someone was elected, they stepped down within 6 months,
right,
you were appointed, the next general election would be in a year and a half.
right.
So then you would have to run at that general election.
Election.
If you won that,
Rather than
you
finishing
would-
out that person's term.
correct, if you won that, you would then be elected for 2 years to
Finish
fill
the
out the
term.
remainder of the unexpired term.
Yeah.
And then you would run again for a full 4-year term.
Okay, well, that makes sense now. Okay, yeah, I'm with you now.
All right, so I think we're good. I think we are. I think there's,
Well, you have the majority, you have
Yeah.
the holdout here, saying, wait a minute. So you've got 4 people, I'm saying,
yes. And I think Commissioner O'Donnell, whatever your name is at this point, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
what's his
Commissioner
face?
O'Donnell.
What's his face?
I was drawing a blank. I'm looking at you.
It's just because we haven't seen him in so long, which
I
is why
know.
we forgot who he was.
I'm usually the unidentified male in the picture, so. While we're on this sensitive subject, I'd like to visit term limits. And the reason I bring up term limits is I know the history of them in Oregon City. But what I would like is we have term limits if you if you consider the person, the vote as a limitation of term. What I don't want is for we have an extremely capable individual, and I'm not doing this for me, believe me. Believe me. I'm a better example that if you don't serve out your term, what happens. But if you have an extremely capable person up here leading, why would you want to take that asset away because of term limits? I mean, if you want term limits, vote the person out of office. So I would be in favor of amending that because I just believe term limits takes away the potential to have a very good leadership model not available to the community. I'll open that up for discussion.
Commissioner Morrow.
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. It's funny you bring this up because I was having this same conversation with the city manager yesterday. And you're right, we do have term limits and they're called elections. And I think it does a disservice to our staff to have so much turnover and not allowing people on the commission to gain expertise, or when they have, when I've been talking to so many people about like, what's the advice you'd give me? So many of them are saying, you're going to feel really comfortable right when you're done. So I think that allowing people to serve, based off of what the voters say would be a positive for this community.
Commissioner Smith.
I'm not sure I want to get into that conversation because that's a long one too. But one of the other issues that has come up in my mind in the past was there's kind of an unfair, well, I wouldn't say unfair. I guess it's a different process when you run for mayor and the mayor's term is aligned with 2 commissioner terms versus the ones that are offset. And in that case, you have kind of a different approach where a commissioner, if they're aligned with the same term as mayor, can run for a commission term and then immediately run for mayor on a second term, as opposed to where it is now with the term limits that if you're offset on that, you have basically a 2-year gap before you run for mayor. And it always seemed to me that set kind of a different expectation for the depending on which position you were in. And whether it was lined up with the mayor's term.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know for some of us who have talked about these issues and running for multiple terms, and we've seen it come up. So I don't have any problem. I think you're going to bring all of this stuff back to us.
Well, is this something in addition that you would?
I think this is an additional charter change that this commission is currently considering to add to the list of things that you bring back to us.
Okay.
That's why I prompted it like that, because I assume you're going to come back to us with the list of here's what we heard and our proposed changes based on what we heard in order to move to next steps before we take it any further. I don't have any problems at all taking this to a vote of the people. All of these changes that we're considering all have pros and cons. This one is probably one that we probably can come up with some pros and cons on with some more time to think about it. But I certainly don't mind putting it on the list and considering putting it out to a vote. But
I've got one goal, and that's to allow this city to have the most effective, competent leadership it possibly can, and disqualifying a capable person because of term limits is a disservice to our own people. You don't like that person or their approach to the business of running this city, you can limit their term. Just vote them out of office.
Commissioner Morrow?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that this is, just like we were talking about with the electoral processes, this would be a different conversation if we were talking about federal issues with parties involved. Because, the argument often is, they're career politicians and
Right.
it's for self-aggrandizement. This is not a career. We're not getting paid for this.
Right,
and
we're
so-
volunteers.
What?
We are volunteers.
What did you say?
And so I think that this is a very different conversation than what we would hear about term limits for Congress,
Right,
for example.
right.
So
We're not getting health benefits, we're not
We're-
getting, anything like
Right.
that, grand salaries or anything.
When they bring
Mayor
this
Lyle
back,
Smith.
I guess I'm not hearing a request for alternatives. It sounds like to remove.
Bless you.
It's an either or, right? Either there are term limits or there not.
Right, or if there's a different
Differentiation.
scenario, or you can't, 18 years over 20, I mean, it sounds like let's let the voters decide, which would be a complete removal from section 7 and 9 of the charter, which deals with commission and mayor term limits.
That's what's been proposed and put on
Okay.
the table. Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, well, being the other political scientist on the other end of the table here, so my undergraduate degree and my master's degree in political science doesn't mean that I'm an expert. It just means that I studied a certain part of it. I would have to say that, I'm shocked that, this is not a career, Commissioner Morrow. And that we're finally getting comfortable. I'm not sure that that's really true. I don't know if you ever really get comfortable, and I would debate that with anyone. Every meeting is a new situation and a new positive challenge, and I'm saying it in that way. So comfort, comfort is relative, but I think that it gets down to what we were talking about earlier with the lack of partisanship. It's either you're called to service or you're not. There's kind of, in my mind, there's no in between. You're either all in or you're not. And this is one of these positions where, you've got to be all in. And it certainly is, I will say that facetiously that people have asked me, has it taken any years off my life? And I said, no, I don't think so. I think it's actually benefited me in my life. And I'm really very proud to be able to represent this city. So it's not something I want to take lightly. And, I'm sure we've all gotten this for, oh, I'm sure glad you're doing it. I'm glad I'm not doing it. So, but I see a commitment to service, and that's a whole different mindset than what we normally see in the arena. So anyway, thank you for your thoughts, my fellow political science major.
All right. I think, is that it? I think that's it for this evening on charter changes, charter/code changes. All right, so any final questions or anything from the staff? No.
Not yet.
Okay, not yet. All right, so we can move on in the agenda, city manager's report.
I have no updates for tonight. Thank you.
All right,
I actually have a question under the city manager's report, if I may.
okay.
So given, I'm assuming that you've been putting your heads together. So the question I have been asked several times already in the last 3 weeks is, after November the 2nd, now what?
I assume you mean regarding the water
Yes,
ballot measure.
regarding the election. So now what? We
So
go
we're
back and-
meeting as a team.
I said you've been putting your heads together, so.
Right. And so I think we're going to sit down, kind of walk through what options are available, and then bring that back for an update and direction from the commission.
So I had a citizen throw this one at me, so we have the ability to borrow money. They said to me, why don't we consider using the money that we're getting from the feds as collateral and go for it? And I said, interesting comment. I don't know what that means.
And I think you're going to have your meeting.
Right.
You're going to have your meetings and a plan of action,
yeah.
and we'll,
I'm just throwing it out there because it was softball to me. So I said, I don't know.
Yeah, so we'll come back, as, as I stated earlier, we allocated 6.5 million of the ARPA funding to water infrastructure. Even if we threw the entirety of the ARPA funding at water infrastructure and changed the priorities that we've adopted in the budget, there's still a larger issue out there that we need to address over the long term.
I agree, probably, but taking something off. So anyway, thank you.
I will say, depending, at least what I've seen is depending on the type of funding mechanism that you're going for, you're typically not allowed to use other federal dollars as match or type of revenue in order to secure additional federal dollars. There's a general, so I think the quick answer to that question is we likely cannot use ARPA dollars as a revenue source for securing additional funds later. We needed the other ballot measure because we needed a revenue source in order to help our bonding. So I look forward to the conversation to see what comes back as alternatives. I personally, we'll see where we get. We raised the fees, the STC, the fees on new development. But if our community is not willing to pony up their share of the cost, I don't know why we would make new developers pay for something that the rest of our city isn't willing to pay for. So I think it'll be an interesting discussion when you guys.
Interesting conversation.
Yeah,
yes.
when you guys come back, because we've got a decent amount of public comment about raising those rates on businesses in Oregon City. So anyway, anything else for the city manager? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to our mini commission committee reports. And I'll just go down the list. Commissioner O'Donnell, you're up first with the Beaver Creek Employment Area Blue Ribbon Committee.
Currently, no developments.
Okay. Citizen Involvement Committee, Commissioner Morrow.
Yeah, so we had a really good roundtable conversation because one thing that we've been discussing as a commission lately is citizen involvement and making sure that citizens feel like their voices have been heard. And so Chair LaSalle did have an opportunity for the representatives to kind of just give their opinions on how things are going. It was mixed, and there are things to be optimistic about and things that we definitely need to be working on. And so I was glad that we could have that open dialogue. And then just a shout out to Christina Roberts and Gardner for taking up so much slack for the turnover in the department and for being the contact person for that committee.
All right, thank you. Clackamas County Coordinating Committee, that's myself. So we did meet last week, and I sent my, the main topic that we discussed was the housing update. This covered multiple funding streams, the housing implementation plan led by the county. We had multiple presenters from Clackamas County reporting on the different pieces of things that are going on. I sent all of my notes. It was a very robust discussion and presentation. I sent my notes to the city commissioners for your review and for further discussion on some items probably later. Other things covered in C4, I guess that I'll mention, Trent Wilson from the county also brought up the Diversion Committee again, the I-205 tolling and the diversion. He said it was about to start. It sounded like there was a meeting scheduled next week. Yeah. So you guys have been waiting on that to happen for a while, and I think we were happy to hear that got scheduled. So maybe our next meeting, you guys can report out. Did you have something on that?
Just that it's scheduled for the 15th, and I was looking at the agenda, and I hope it's a two-way conversation, because the agenda looked like everything was coming at you as opposed to interactive. So hopefully it's more productive than that. It's just welcome and introductions, scope and mission of the committee, and another ODOT presentation, which I could probably do for them, and then future meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we will see.
I'm confident that you two will be able to provide some opinion back to that committee.
I have a question about that. So we have not formally taken any vote about.
You need to turn on your mic.
Taken any official position, but I think we all made it very clear when our colleagues from ODOT came that we were not thrilled with the idea of tolling. So I know, I'm just assuming that when you are representing us, that is the opinion that you will be setting forth, that...
Is that direction?
No, it's not direction. I'm asking the question. I mean, when I get asked, I said, well, I can...
Yeah, that's our position.
I said, when I've been asked about it myself, I said, well, we haven't taken a formal vote, but I said, I can tell you nobody on this group is thrilled with it, and we'd rather, we'd like to be able to say thank you, but no thank you.
Well, actually, Commissioner Morrow and I have discussed it, and we were going to preface any comment we made at that meeting with the statement that Commissioner McGriff told us to tell you.
You tell them whatever you need to tell them. If that will provide you any leverage, which I doubt would not provide any, but if it provides you some cover, go ahead.
We're on the same page, believe me.
I think there is general consensus that our community is not supportive of tolling, and therefore several of us are representing this conversation. I represented at C4. Commissioner O'Donnell, Commissioner Morrow will be representing us in this diversion committee. I don't know how much you all will be talking about tolling per se versus the actual diversion. And so I hope it stays focused on diversion, because we've heard from ODOT multiple times on tolling, and ODOT will be at C4 at the December meeting to discuss tolling. So if you want to participate in that meeting, if you want to hear an update from ODOT, I feel like we've gotten a lot of updates, but I'm just telling you, it is the primary topic. So
is it the update to the update to the update?
Right, yeah, so the November meeting that we had last week was focused on housing. It was a really good update. I think all of the cities wanted to get an update. We felt like there was a lack of information coming out of Clackamas County. Tolling, I don't feel the same on. I think tolling, everybody just wants to kind of tackle this topic and again express our uncomfortable and unhappiness with tolling. So, but it is on the December agenda, so I want to mention that to you. It's the primary topic. So if you're so inclined.
So neither one of them would have any objection if I walked around with a sign that says, "We don't want no stinking diversion."
No, and I'm sure you'll be in good company.
Can you make 3 of those signs?
Absolutely.
And after we sent out the after action report about the wildfire and the ice storm, the county did finally send it out to all of the other cities at the C4 meeting. I can't imagine we were the only ones asking for it. The date on the report was August, so I found it funny that they said that it was just released. But either way, it was sent out to all the other cities last week, and we got it in advance of everybody else, thanks to Chief Band, and I think Lisa reached out as well.
Yeah, I'm still slugging through it, but it's very interesting.
Yeah. All right, so that's it for C4. So lots going on there. Clackamas County I-205 tolling diversion. Oh, we just talked about that.
Yep.
We got a meeting. Y'all got a meeting next week. Clackamas Heritage Partners, Commissioner Smith.
Just a few things on that. We're actually having an event on Friday. The Clackamas Heritage Partners Board is welcoming the tribal council from the Confederated Grand Ronde Tribe, the Confederated Tribe of the Grand Ronde, to see the movie that we've produced about Oregon's first people. And so we're having kind of a premiere for the tribal council on Friday. Eventually, of course, there'll be a public premiere of that movie. So we're excited about that. The End of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center and CHP are in the conversations about how to get the building reopened and dealing with some of the issues of that. And the ability to want to open in full and not in some partial way. There's some questions about the future funding of the visitor center component of the End of the Oregon Trail through the county. Some of the tourism funds were actually sent back to the county in the past during COVID, because we were kind of putting a hold on some of the tourism efforts. But that conversation is kind of going forward, and we're not really sure to what degree funding will be coming for the visitor center component in terms of the regional visitor center. So that's one question that has been in conversations. Let's see what else. The CHP is also, Clackamas Heritage Partners is working with city right now on some plans and some ideas and concepts for representation of a longhouse to be built on the end of the Oregon Trail interpretive site. And so that's something exciting for the future to try to continue to tell more of the Native story on the end of the trail location. There's some, issues that complicate that because obviously we're not going to be able to build a complete replica of a longhouse in a floodplain, but it'll be kind of an open building that will represent a longhouse and will be able to be a place that we can tell some of those stories in the future. So those are some of the things that are going on with that.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Smith. And you have the next committee as well, Clackamas Water and Environmental Services.
I don't have anything. I missed the last meeting on that, so I'll have to get a report back to you on that one.
Okay. Downtown Oregon City Association, Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, we are organizing at a retreat. We are working on the 4 pillars of the Main Street program. Each of the committees we have all the committees assigned except for one, and we are working on that appointment at this point in time. I'm be working with Commissioner Morrow on the design group, which not only is design, but looks at new construction, buildings, possible opportunities for facade improvements. So we hope to be working with Mr. Graham on this, because this is an economic development, or actually Ms. Griffin on this. The other thing is that the organization is meeting with Mr. Graham tomorrow to review the draft of the Memorandum of Understanding. And I will say this, as Commissioner Smith pointed out last time, is that there was a very successful small trick-or-treating downtown on Friday before Halloween. It was not overrun, which is what it's like in 2019, which I was also down there. It was very calm and orderly, which was really good. I really appreciated the fact that all the parents were either masked, the kids were masked, not only with masks on, but masks on their masks. And I think a good time was had by all. So Commissioner Morrow, Commissioner Smith and I were in different locations. We were handing out candy passerbys.
Okay. Thank you for that. The next committee is IMPACT, which is the Metro Policy Advisory Committee. I attended that meeting on October 27th. A couple of items there. Metro is currently doing a redistricting based on the census. They are drawing new maps for the districts within the Metro boundary. Maps are due by early December. There is a public comment process where folks can get involved and provide comments back about the districts. It looks like our district is likely, at least what I've heard, is likely probably staying the same. The areas where the populations are changing is really on the east and the west sides of the metro area. So think around the Gresham area and then out toward Beaverton area of the metro area. So I think that's where the changes in the district maps are most likely to happen. And also Newell Creek Canyon. I have seen, I believe, December 6th as a grand opening date at the impact meeting. It sounded like November, early December. I believe it's now set for early December. So just marker I don't believe they're doing anything in person. It's more of a virtual kind of virtual opening. But I know since they sent out the really nice, colorful flyer that they sent to, I think, households in Oregon City, there's been some conversations. I know I was asked multiple times as a result of that. I do know I have expressed some concerns about sending a bunch of people down to the canyon with the homeless population that is down there. So I don't know, Chief Ban, if you have any follow up on that. I would love, I'm hoping that there's some sort of walkthrough or something like that before there's more of a splash online about how the canyon is going to open and we expect visitors. I don't know if there's where the homeless folks are located within the canyon versus trails that have been advertised or the day use areas.
What about a little presentation by Metro Park staff about this very thing? Because the one thing that you probably got that I got was there was no information on it about, well, when is this? Yeah, this is great. We love the flyer, but where are the details? They
have asked recently, I know Mr. Conkle and I both got an email from Metro of trying to fit it into one of our agendas. I don't know if Mr. Conkle, if you've made any inroads on that.
Councilor Lewis from Metro will be here for the November 17th commission meeting to provide a brief presentation on this.
Okay. Chief Ban, do you have any comments on that?
I think where we're going to find a rub in terms of response and calls, people will come out to that parking lot there if there are issues. We do not have standing down there, and it is not our jurisdiction, it's the county. And in terms of homeless issues, we tend to try and be really responsive, and I'm not, to have a patrol deputy come show up, there's going to be something that we're going to have to work out there with Metro, and I don't know, I have no idea what that looks like.
Okay.
Part of that's still in Clackamas County, is it all in Oregon, in the city limits?
The vast majority of it's in Clackamas County.
That's what I thought. So people would be allegedly calling the county.
Yeah, I think what's likely going to happen is I'm going to receive emails and phone calls, and Chief Ban's going to receive emails and phone calls, and we need to at least be prepared on what our messaging is and who they need to contact at the county regarding, safety concerns, and the same thing with Metro. Yeah, I'm anticipating. I know it. I can see the writing on that wall pretty easily. So I am concerned. I'm happy that Christine Lewis will come.
I think these will be great questions for her. We've given them a heads up. My understanding is that there is going to be a ranger assigned. So I think that'll be the continuing discussions as it returns of contacts to address issues that will arise.
Well, I'm hoping they have their staff here and not leave Christine out there hanging out there.
Hopefully, she's our elected representative, and hopefully she either brings staff that have answers to our questions and stuff. So more to come on that one, but it did come up, and I just wanted to mention it. The last thing I'll mention real quickly on impact was regional solid waste was the primary presentation that we had. In case you didn't know it, the Metro solid waste fees were increased effective July 1, 2021. They said that the residential customer impact for this was approximately 90 cents per month. So it was a small increase. What that increase was paying for is maintaining current operations, and essentially in 2020, due to COVID, Metro and the solid waste program had to dip into their contingency fund. It sounds like pretty heavily, or to some amount, that they felt like this rate increase would help them to return their contingency fund back to where it was following that depletion of that fund. The other big thing that came out of that is about recycling. And in the 2021 legislative session, there was a bill that passed, Senate Bill 582, and it essentially put the state, no surprise there, it put the state in control of deciding what is on the recycling list and how best to collect specific products. So there is an agency that is working on rulemaking. They have an advisory committee that is just now forming, and for interested parties. I guess there's probably not much more to say on that. Just know that I believe it was called the Plastics Pollution and Recycling Modernization Act. It becomes effective January 1. And this new system for recycling products and all of this kind of stuff is supposed to go into effect July 1 of 2025. So still some rulemaking, some work on this forthcoming, but I know I've heard from a few people in our community that were interested in our recycling program and improving that program. So if you hear of folks, this may be an opportunity to point them to this rulemaking, this activity that's happening at the state level, since the state has decided that they want to get involved in the recycling programming. So
Talking about 582.
Senate Bill 582, yep.
I'm just reading a synopsis about it here. It just says, other things it says it does is prohibits commingled recyclables collected under the Opportunity to Recycle Act from being delivered to commingled processing facilities unless facilities meet performance standards. I know we were getting ready to start the, the pilot project to do
The food
waste, and then COVID hit, and so I'm hoping that that comes back on the table. I know that we ended up incurring a lot more trash because everybody was taking stuff out, and that's potentially been a problem, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I think the commingling of items and having places to recycle some items has been an issue regionally.
Right.
It's been in the news, so if you've watched the news in the last year and a half, you've probably heard about it. So anyway, that was the primary update from MPAC. And if this is your topic of interest in the community, there is a place for you to get involved on recycling. All right. OC 2040 Advisory Team, Commissioner Morrow and Commissioner McGriff.
We have a meeting tomorrow.
Our first meeting since the 4 community summits. There was a survey sent out to make sure that the takeaways were supported by the people who attended. And so I'm looking forward to tomorrow's meeting if Commissioner McGriff has anything else to add.
No, I'm also looking forward to talking about those results as well. And we shall see. So it's been moving along. I've been very pleased with, the process. I think we all received an email from one of the community participants. I have not opened the item that they want to have included. I don't know where that would fall, so I'll have to rely on staff. I did forget to mention under item G that I believe we'll be having a presentation by Sherry Stewart on the just basically a refresher on just what Main Street is. So if you've forgotten what it is, need a refresher, this is going to be that, and what it does and how it works and how important it is. So just wanted to backtrack on that, but I'm looking forward to the meeting tomorrow.
Okay, great. The next item is the Oregon Governor's Willamette Falls Locks Commission. There was a meeting. I attended that on October 27th. Essentially, the main issue there is that all of the commissioners, their terms end December 31st. I know I mentioned this, that my appointment was only for like 3 months, and we were questioning if that was right or not. It is right. It comes to find out everybody's commission, the whole commission is terming out December 31st. And so now they are in a process question of trying to figure out how to get the entire commission reappointed all together so that we can continue work. The commission is supposed to continue until June 30th of 2022. So we were actually able to get some clarification on what was happening with all of that. We elected a new leadership team, a chair and a vice chair. Christine Lewis is going to be the new chair of the Willamette Falls Locks Commission, and then the vice chair, I believe, is Mayor Walters. I believe she's the primary vice chair. And then last thing on that agenda was really this committee is working on the new Willamette Falls Locks Authority. This is the group that's going to take over and work on advising, the development of the new authority and the new owner for the locks. And so just going through, the Willamette Falls Locks Commission would like to make recommendations to the governor on who should be on the new authority, and the 6 months into June 30th, 2022 allows for knowledge transfer between the existing Willamette Falls Locks Commission and the new members who will be appointed by the governor to be on the authority. So lots of discussion there about who in the community, elected leaders, previous electeds, just a whole variety of stakeholders of who should be recommended to be on the new Locks Authority. And that's pretty much it. But it is moving forward, which is good news. Oregon City Tourism Stakeholders Group, Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Smith.
All I can say that what we've been doing, what's going on currently is training for those who operate our facilities, whether it be Ermitinger House or our museums or whatever. Our first training periods were on accounting and the fundamentals of accounting, and then we're about to have, actually undergoing right now, social media and digital marketing confirmation. And those are all skills to make us more effective and more productive in our operation of our tourism facilities. And Commissioner McGriff and I have both been attending those and sitting in just for the knowledge of it. That's it now.
Commissioner Smith, do you have anything else to add on that?
No, I did not attend the first concierge meeting, but I plan to attend some of them in the future. So yeah, it's started and it's going well.
Okay, great. Okay, Oregon City Westland Pedestrian Bicycle Bridge Concept Plan Project Advisory Committee. That's a really long name. Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, well, there are no meetings scheduled at this time, but I do want you to know that Councilor Baumgartner and I are continuing to have discussions and looking at particularly issues and opportunities on their side of the river. So we're just continuing to work together and to talk about these things so that we are, we have communication going.
Okay.
But there are no meetings scheduled that I can see.
Yeah, I think maybe the project advisory committee is mostly done, and it's in the hands of going back to the commissions on the respective cities. For further.
We did talk about the fact that we both think that it would be appropriate to have another follow-up meeting with them to talk about this particular topic and other development-related things on both sides of the river. And I said, well, we'll leave that up to our respective city managers to a doodle poll, just trying to find a date that works. That was very laborious, and I appreciate the work that you guys put into that. That was a nightmare. But we both agree that the conversation should continue, not just on this particular topic, but that we should be meeting together from time to time anyway. So that's our shot there.
Yeah. Okay. South Fork Water Board, there's 3 of us. Commissioner O'Donnell, you were not at the last meeting. Commissioner Smith, do you want to give the update?
Not much to update. We didn't have a quorum, so we went through the agenda. We did not vote on any business that night.
Yep. Yes, and we have no meetings are planned to be scheduled until January of 2022.
Just a quick question about that particular board is that obviously there's been notice in the paper about the fact that because of the bridge work that Westland is going to be severely constrained with their water line that is under the bridge. And we're not a partner to that, but we're partners in the water distribution. And I don't know what sort of discussions that have been involving or whether or not we are supporting them in their efforts to get ODOT to help pay for some of that in terms of South Fork Water Board or even our own commission. But yeah, they're kind of between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, that did come up. Mayor Walters brought it up at the South Fork Water Board meeting. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, Commissioner Smith, you can add if I missed something. I think in general, South Fork Water Board has said we're willing to help you and support you as much as possible to make sure you have water. But I don't remember. I don't recall. Commissioner Smith, was there more to that conversation?
Yeah, I believe our CEO was meeting with the city manager, and we're going to talk about how they can be assisting with that. So it's been a conversation. We don't have any details about how we would be helping, but it's a major concern on the Westland side of the river because it's a huge expense that they were not anticipating, or at least not to the number that it's being told. So it's still pretty new in terms of how they're going to approach it. And so we're just kind of trying to support that as much as we can.
Yeah, my understanding from talking to Mayor Walters is I think the numbers changed like 3 times, anywhere from like 1 million to 20 million. So, which is a pretty big difference in a number, and asking for a city to come up with that kind of cash for water. So that's kind of the issue. And I, as far as I know, like I said, South Fork Water Board is kind of like, we're here to support you and help you and try to make sure that you have water. But I know I think Mayor Walters is leading the details of those conversations, and they haven't brought anything specifically back to South Fork Water Board for that.
As long as we can be supportive and, apply what other pressure, if we have any leverage, I don't know if we do, but, if the cities are united in this particular effort, it just benefits everybody in the long term, I believe.
Okay. All right. Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area, Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, I'm very excited to let you know that we held the first of 2 trainings that we're doing with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've hired a consultant, Dr. Jennifer Perrine, to help us work through this. The interesting thing that I want to just summarize for you that's interesting about Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area is that it's not like doing DEI with a city or a company, because we don't represent just one entity. We represent over 20 different entities, all with basic interest in the heritage area, but not anybody is over the heritage area. So our approach to diversity, equity, inclusion is going to be very, very different from any of the other processes that even exist. And I mean, they're all different, but again, normally we're dealing with a city, a county, or a company, or some group that's pretty homogeneous and homogeneous. And this isn't the case with this group. And I think the consultant, recognized that right off the bat. So we're struggling a little bit with how to apply equity and diversity and inclusion across the board in a general way so that it applies to everyone and every group can take a little bit of a pivot to how they're going to implement it. So that's really the big challenge to this process. And I know we've got some folks on the board that are a little uncomfortable, which Dr. Perrine already said, get ready to be uncomfortable because that's where we're going to be. But I think the other thing that's been very unique is that nobody has said the statement, oh, I feel guilty about X. And I think that's really good, because once someone acknowledges that, I'm not saying that it's wrong, but it puts the focus on themselves as opposed to the overall effort that we're trying to look at. So we're not talking about the individuals, we're talking about the entire system that was created basically by only being able to tell one story. And we in no means are trying to say we're experts, that we know all the stories and we're going to tell everybody's story, because we don't know. So I think there's an acknowledgement of that. And it's just how to take baby steps in terms of making the broader perspective about how this heritage area applied to many different groups over the centuries. So our next one is the 15th, so it's coming up.
All right. And then the last item we have is the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. And that's myself and Commissioner O'Donnell. And there have been no meetings and no communications. So I don't think we have anything to report on that. All right. And with that, we have made it through all of our commission committee report outs. I'm not seeing any urgent hands for needing to say anything. So with that, we are adjourned. Thanks all.